early in my sales career, I really focused on the outcome of the sales call and the results. And it took me a long time to realize I was focusing on the wrong thing. If I made the sale, I got excited. If I didn't make it, I was in despair. And I learned that to focus on the outcome and the results was the wrong thing. I eventually learned that focusing on the activities, the things that I did, the things that I could control. In other words, what can you control?
This episode is brought to you in part by TSE Certified Sales Training Program. It's a program designed to help new and struggling sellers improve and take their skills to a whole new level. Get access to the first 2 modules absolutely free. Find more information at thesalesevangelist.com/free course. This episode is also brought to you in part by Sales Success Summit. This year's Sales Success Summit is held in Austin, Texas from October 14th to the 15th. Learn from the top 1%ers in sales, what makes them succeed, and how you can improve. Sign up today at top1summit.com. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another great episode of the Sales Evangelist Podcast. I'm your host, Donald Kelly, the Sales Evangelist. And I'm so excited for another great episode. I'm so excited to be here with you today. And on this episode, we have Brad McDonald. Now, the cool thing about Brad is that he knows how to make things happen. And he knows a thing or two about sales. He is an operations director at Sandler Training. It's an amazing organization, one of the first sales training programs that I went through. And he's responsible for domestic franchises, growth, and support. Now, this includes all facets of onboarding, training, coaching all the trainers within the network, and he also provides on-site training to Sandler global clients. And on this particular episode, Brad and I are going to discuss why he says that failure is the greatest sales lesson. It's some good stuff. Welcome to the show, Brad.
Thank you, Donald. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me on board.
Oh, yes, sir. I'm excited to have you. I'm going to pick your brains today because I know you're going to bring us a lot of value. And specifically, we're going to talk about some failures. We all know as sales reps, you're going to get knocked down plenty of times. But why is this such a great lesson and how sometimes we ignore and don't want to fail? But you said that in your book, which we're going to talk about too, that failure is a great lesson. And just so intrigued by the concept. And I believe it as well. So I want to chat about it. But before we hit up on all the good stuff there with that, why don't you tell us a little bit more about you and what you do?
Well, I work with Sandler Systems, which is based near Baltimore, Maryland. And we have 250 offices or franchises around the world, each one owned by an individual who helps salespeople and businesses get rid of sales problems. We help them grow their businesses through improving their sales process. A lot of that is helping people embrace new and better belief systems about things like failure.
Well, let's do it. Let's talk about, first off, how would you define failure? Because I feel that so many in different industries, failure can be looked at in different ways. How would you go about defining that?
Well, I came from a world prior to my sales time, Donald, where I was in the U.S. Navy for 28 years and I was a submarine officer. And failure was not something that was tolerated very much. We had an expression on submarines that a submarine was a place where you don't make the same mistake once because it could be life and death. And when I got out of the Navy and came into the sales world, it was very different for me because I realized you had to make a lot of attempts to do things that were going to result in failure. And the idea of picking up the phone and making a call and having somebody hang up on me, to me, that was a huge failure because that didn't happen in the Navy. Having a person set an appointment with me and then not showing up or canceling, that was a huge failure. Making a sales proposal to somebody and having them say no, that also to me was a failure. And I had to realize, change the paradigm, that none of those things are really failures. They're attempts to overturn the stone and find the little chunk of gold that might not have resulted in the gold, but they're not failures. And if you do enough of those things that feel like failure in the moment, you're on the way to success. So I don't know if I've answered your question defining failure. I think, we see those bumper stickers that say failure is not an option. In fact, one of the chapters of my book is Embrace Failure.
Embrace failure. So why do you feel that we should embrace failure, and why do you feel that it's not that bad after all?
Well, most salespeople would probably agree that they have to make a lot of attempts either to pick up the phone and call a lot of prospects to get somebody that wants to talk to you. You have to do a lot of sales calls to get to a yes. And if we see the no, if we see the sales calls that end in a no as a failure, then it feels kind of bad. Let me give you the gumball analogy. If you go to a gumball machine and you say, I only want a green gumball, but there's all different colors of gumballs in there. And when you put the quarter or the dime in the machine and turn the handle, there's a chance you're not going to get a green gumball. Now, let's suppose there's 3 colors of gumballs in that machine. Let's say I'm making prospecting phone calls, initial calls, cold calls, the most dreaded form of prospecting. And I know that somewhere in there, if I make 10, 20, 30 calls, I'll probably get somebody that wants to talk to me. That's the green gumball, person that wants to talk to me after I do my introduction. And there's a chance they will meet with me and we might do business together. But I'm probably also going to get an orange or gumball or 2 out of it. That's the one that has no interest, doesn't want to talk to me. I might get a blue gumball. Blue gumball is the one that says, not sure. Let's talk a little bit more to see if this is of interest to me. So if I view every orange or gumball as a failure, it's not going to be very motivating to keep going and wait for the green one. But if I just view an orange gumball as, hey, I have to get that out of the way before I get to that green gumball, well, then I can embrace the failures. I think that, for me, as I said, coming out of a world in the Navy where I was very respected and people did what I told them to do, when I was a submarine captain and I gave a sailor an order, he pretty much did it. There was no option for him to say no. Plus, they told me the truth and they respected me. And I came out of that world into sales and I found out, big surprise, prospects don't always tell the truth. They certainly don't respect my time. And they don't feel any need to follow my orders. It was all different. And initially, those things seemed like failures to me. But what I did was I learned to accept and embrace the no's along the way as getting me one step closer to the yes.
What about when it comes towards, let's say that if it's, what if you do get down by the no? What if it is something that's, if you keep getting no, it's going to affect you. And when it comes towards your closing your pipeline and so forth, and you don't have the strong mental will yet, how can you mentioned the gumball analogy, but is there something that we can do on a day-to-day basis to get acclimated to the fact that we are going to get some of those failures?
Well, I think that, it leads to what I say is a process of dealing with failure. I think that when we go through failure, it's kind of like the stages of grief. And you've probably heard of those: disbelief, fear, despair, anger, and acceptance. So I think when we embrace this failure, you're asking, how do we deal with it? I think part of it is another chapter in the book, which is what I call the okay, not okay principle. And to me, the revelation that I had in those first couple of years of sales that got me through that was the simple realization that I needed to be okay being not okay. Sounds like a little bit of a tongue twister, but I needed to not try to get my emotional needs met in a sales call. And if I have a theme to this book, it is that. Don't try to get my emotional needs in life met in my sales process, my sales calls. What I mean by that is I think that a lot of us get emotionally involved in our sales calls. In fact, I think that's one of what I call 5 big conceptual roadblocks in sales. I call it head trash. In Sandler, we call it head trash, the negative beliefs we have. We get emotionally involved. So a prospect says, this looks pretty good. I think you're about to make a big sale. I think people get excited. And when we get excited, we stop doing the things we need to do to close that sale. It's like in football, taking the kickoff on a 20-yard line and running downfield. And 10 yards later, the prospect says, this looks good. Another 10 yards, the prospect says, money's no object here. 10 more yards, the prospect says, I think you're about to make a big sale. So now we're on the 50. Things are looking great. And instead of continuing to do the things we need to do, we spike the ball on the 50. We've got another 50 yards to the end zone. Get into the end zone, and we think when the sale doesn't close, when the prospect disappears into the witness protection program, we think we fumbled on the 1-yard line, when in fact we spiked it back on the 50 because we got emotionally involved. So I know I'm wandering a little bit here. My point is, The people who get emotionally involved, which I was one, I absolutely one of those people. I would get excited in my early sales career. I heard nice things from prospects like, this looks pretty good. I think we're going to do this. And I started to get emotionally involved, and I stopped to close the sale.
Hey, we're going to take a quick break, but when we get back, Brad and I are going to continue the discussion on why he feels that failure is the greatest sales lesson. You're listening to the Sales Evangelist podcast, and I'm your host, Donald Kelly, the Sales Evangelist. Way too often we find sales reps who become lethargic in their career. You know what I mean? It's just kind of, you've been there too. You just go into the slump and you feel like you can't get out. You're not closing deals, no new opportunities. And it's just blah. What I've seen to help me at that point is obviously listen to podcasts like this, read books, but also attend events where I can connect with other sellers. People who could challenge me, people who could bring new ideas and new thought. And that's why I recommend everyone to check out Sales Success Summit. The neat thing about this event is that you get a chance to connect with other top 1%ers, people who are doing amazing in sales. Learn from them. What's making them succeed? What's causing them to get out of their rut? How did they elevate to the status they're at right now in their companies? If you are serious about earning six figures as a sales rep, I highly recommend you go to top1summit.com. Again, top1summit.com and register to attend the event. Last year, one of the attendees, a sales rep for a small company, went to the event. He networked with other top sellers. Since then, he landed a position at Teradata where he closed a huge deal. Now he's receiving a multi-six-figure commission check from it. All because he went where iron sharpens iron. If you want to learn from the best, go to top1summit.com and register today. This episode is also brought to you in part by TSE Certified Sales Training Program. As a young seller, I just didn't have it. I didn't have any guidance. I didn't have any help, and I had to figure things out on my own. Luckily, I was able to take part in a group training course. Not long after the course, I started to see a hockey stick in my sales performance, and I knew this stuff worked. So I started to talk about it and share the advice and ideas, and I said in the future, whenever I create something, it's going to be similar to that. And that's how we've designed TSE Certified Sales Training Program. To get the first two modules of the course for free, go to thesalesevangelist.com/free course. Again, thesalesevangelist.com/free course. When you register and become a member, you will get the other 10 modules, as well as access to our community of other sales reps that you can connect with and join conversation with each week. Find more information again, go to thesalesevangelist.com/free course. Hey, we're back. Now, Brad and I are going to dive back into the conversation. And as we do, I ask that you guys listen to see how you can take the next failure you face and make it into an opportunity to improve your sales skills. Listen up. Yeah, and I've been there too. I think every sales rep that's listening to this is probably can nod their head and say, yeah, I've been on that path. I made that belief. I followed that idea. And, it wasn't the case. I was premature in my thinking. Now, however, the sales leaders don't always think like this. I'm telling you, because sales leaders, they want to get that, they see your pipeline. They want to make sure things are going to close and they're all excited. But how can sales leaders listen to this episode today? How can you help that sales leader understand that, hey, things are going to happen and basically take it easy on your sellers? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the main thought I have is that early in my sales career, I really focused on the outcome of the sales call and the results. And it took me a long time to realize I was focusing on the wrong thing. If I made the sale, I got excited. If I didn't make it, I was in despair. And I learned that the focus on the outcome and the results was the wrong thing. I eventually learned that focusing on the activities, the things that I did, the things that I could control. In other words, what can you control? You really can't control if a prospect says yes or no. You can't really control if they hand you a check or not. What could I control? I learned that I could control how many prospecting attempts I made. I learned that I could control how many times I asked for it. I learned that I could control my tonality, my demeanor, my body language. And when I learned to focus on the activities that I could control and count those things on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis, instead of focusing on did I make the sale or not, then I started doing the things that I needed to do to be successful. And by tracking those things and tuning them, then I had better results. So my suggestion to salespeople and business owners and sales managers is to focus on the upfront activities and the process and not so much on the yes or no.
So what are some of those activities that you would recommend that they focus on?
Well, now we're getting into the tactics, of sales. And if I can back up for a second, maybe, and talk about some of the concepts,
Sure.
what I call the conceptual roadblocks of sales, as we talked about it a little bit a minute ago, not getting emotionally involved. There's a chapter here in the book about staying adult and leaving your child behind, and how to avoid games and childhood messages, life scripts, and sales success, things like that. But there's also a chapter called Take Out the Head Trash. In that chapter, I think if a sales manager, if I think back to my first 2 years, if I could have had a sales manager focus on something with me that really would have been helpful, as opposed to just telling me good job when I made a sale and not so good job when I didn't, it would have been to deal with the conceptual issues that I had that were getting in the way. Is it okay if I take a minute and sort of cover what I think are the 5 big conceptual issues
Oh, yeah.
and help people with? When I say conceptual problems, I think all sales problems tend to come in one of 2 categories. It's either tactical, which is what do I say, when do I say it, how do I say it, or it's conceptual. And conceptual meaning the beliefs that we have between our ears about what we're doing. And in reality, I think most tactical problems have at their basis some kind of conceptual belief about what we're doing. And once again, in my case, coming out of this long Navy career where I was kind of a big shot and I wasn't afraid of much, I wasn't afraid of dying for my country. When I had to pick up the telephone and make my first cold call, my hands were shaking and I couldn't understand that. Why was I so concerned? Why was I scared to make a cold call? I'll never forget that first cold call. Well, it was the beliefs I had in my head. And one of them, one of the 5 big conceptual problems I think salespeople deal with, the first one I would say is need for approval. Let's face it, most of us, we want to be liked. It's more fun to be liked than to not be liked. But a problem begins when you want to be liked more than you want to make sales. We all have psychological trash we're carrying around in our head. And I'm not a psychologist and don't try to be, although this is about sales psychology. But we have a lot of unmet needs in our life. Some of them have to do with not being liked or not being loved by the right people. And sometimes we take these needs into our sales call. And we're more concerned looking across the table. Is that man or woman sitting there going to like me when I walk out of this room? Then we're concerned with, are they going to give me a check? Important to remember, sales is not a place to get our emotional needs met. It's a place to bank. So that's the first big conceptual problem is, do I need you to like me versus do I need to see if we can do business together? The second big conceptual problem is what I call buy cycle, B-U-Y, buy cycle. How do you buy things? And it's a simple question for all of us in sales to ask, which is, how do I treat salespeople when somebody's trying to sell something to me? And generally speaking, people tend to sell the way they buy and buy the way they sell. So if your buy cycle, if the way you buy things is to always want to think it over and comparison shop and want to chip away at the salesperson's price, things like that, you will probably tend to create or sort of welcome that type of behavior from your own prospect. And one of the best things I did in trying to get rid of that head trash myself was I made a pledge. And my pledge was, I will never again tell a salesperson I need to think it over. I'm either going to tell them yes or I'm going to tell them no. Once I have their information, I'll tell them I'll think it over. So that's the second of the 5 big conceptual problems. The third one is negative scripts. When I was in 3rd grade, I remember walking across the street because our neighbors bought a new car. And Donald, I said to the lady, how much did it cost? What do you think my mother said to me at that point?
Don't ever ask somebody about money or talk about money like that.
Exactly.
That's rude.
That's right. Yeah. And so fast forward about 25, 30 years, and I was, after the Navy, I was selling investments and insurance. And of course, if you're an insurance salesman, you need to tell people, this is the first month's premium and I need a check now. And when every time it came time to do that, guess who was standing on my shoulder saying, don't talk about money?
Mama was right there.
And so that's an example of, negative script from childhood. Most of us were not raised by parents who said, I hope you grow up to be a successful salesman. They said they want to be a lawyer or a dentist or an engineer or, have a good job as a teacher. They didn't say, I want you to, wear a polyester suit and be a salesman. So we have negative scripts. We already talked about that emotional involvement. That's another one of the conceptual problems. And, when we get emotionally involved, think about an explosive specialist, a guy that goes in and defuses bombs. That's somebody you don't want getting emotionally involved in their job. So, while I think we need to engage and have a pleasant and sincere and genuine demeanor and love for our prospects, we also need to have a mindset that says, I'd love to work with you, but I'm financially independent and I don't need your business. So let's decide what's best for both of us here. And then one more of those conceptual problems is money concept. I don't know what your first memory of money is, Donald, but that's a question I ask salespeople a lot. What is your very first memory of money? When they talk about it, it seems to have some relationship or relation to how they feel about money now. And if you grew up without much money, it's possible that deep down inside you have a belief that you're not worth a whole lot. And in sales, I don't know about you, but I remember in my insurance job, I could work for days and sometimes weeks without making a nickel. And then all of a sudden, I remember the time after 2 weeks of not closing anything. In 2 hours, I closed a sale and I made an $8,000 commission. How do you think I felt about myself?
You felt like $1 million.
I actually felt a little guilty. I wanted to feel like $1 million, but I felt a little guilty. Like, did I really deserve to make $8,000 in a couple hours? And it made me realize that I had a money concept that I needed to work on a little bit. So anyway, with these kind of conceptual problems in the way, I think it goes back to that whole thing about failure. What do I deserve here in sales? So those are what I call the big 5 head trash things. The way we buy is the way we sell. Our need to be liked, does it exceed our need to sell? Do I have negative scripts from childhood? Do I get emotionally involved in the sales process? And how do I feel about money? Am I confident discussing with people? Do I feel like I can make it?
Interesting that you point out some of those simple ideas. And I imagine no matter what industry sellers are in, whether it's from selling complex software down to selling insurance, you're going to see the same exact idea because you take it with you as an individual. How do we get to overcome that now?
Well, I think changing our own beliefs is a process. It took me several years, and I have to say I was working on this book for a long, long time. When I realized that the emotional toll of sales could possibly put me out of sales and was like a roller coaster. When I realized that I was going to have to work on myself and how I felt about sales as much or more than I was going to have to work on better lines, better sales tactics, and things like that. So in fact, what I did for my own personal sales therapy was I sat down every Sunday afternoon for years and I wrote an article. I like to write. I'm not saying I'm a great writer. I'm just saying I'm a guy that likes to write. I wrote about my own sales experiences. I would hear things like one example of a chapter in the book is, you might remember, it's been 10 years ago now when that U.S. air flight was leaving LaGuardia Airport and lost both engines to bird strikes, landed in the Hudson River.
Yep.
And I thought about that at the time in relation to sales. And I thought the pilot, his name was Sullenberger. I think his name was Chesley Sullenberger. And in fact, if you don't mind, I'll just read a short section from the book here. Is that okay?
Let's do it.
So the chapter is titled Make Decisions to Get Decisions. When U.S. Air Flight 1529 lost both engines to bird strikes just after takeoff on January 15, 2009, what do you suppose pilot Sully Sullenberger's decision process was as he opted to land in the Hudson River? You think he talked it over with a committee? When offered 2 runway options by ground controllers, do you think he said, let me think it over? Do you suppose he requested some time to do some research? It's amazing how fast you can make decisions when you have to. It's also amazing how slow you make them when you don't have to. In his book, Link, author Malcolm Gladwell contends that people make their best and most accurate decisions in the first 2 seconds of facing a situation. So I thought about pilot made his decisions, which led me to think about how people make decisions in sales. And the fact that if I got it, it started to make me think, if I get a lot of people telling me they want to think it over, it's probably my problem. And I'm allowing it to happen. So that's a long way of answering your question. But by writing these articles, helped me work through the sort of emotional aspects of sales, okay, not okay. And by the way, this article here, it led me to being, in my opinion, much more effective at getting people to make decisions, not hammering them over the head, beating them with a bat or anything like that, but having better, honest, upfront discussions about how they were going to make decisions and when they were going to make decisions, and not telling me they wanted to think it over. So that was my sort of process. Sales therapy. I'm not saying that's for everybody, but I do believe that any salesperson can get out a journal, write about their experiences, work through those emotional aspects. Failure, being okay, being not okay, the head trash we talked about, getting people to make decisions, things like that.
Love it. Well, a lot of these things can help us to overcome our fears and help us to get on the right path. But it really comes back down to what you're saying there. It's psychology. It's overcoming these things in our minds first, in our heads, and then it's going to help us to be able to perform. Then we can implement some of those other things when it comes towards being effective and following the activities. Now, the last piece I want to talk to you about is about this book. So you did write a book, The Art and Skill of Sales Psychology. I spoke about that at the very beginning, before we started recording here. And now I want us to, if you don't mind telling us a couple more things about the book. Why did you decide to write this book at this particular time, and how folks can get in touch with you to get access to the book?
Yeah, thank you. Well, as I said, starting 15 years ago, I was about 1 year into my fledgling sales career, and I was doing okay. I was making a decent living selling investments and insurance. Well, I was a financial advisor, which really means, AKA salesman. I was doing okay. But this guy calls me up a year into it, and he says, I'm a sales coach. Would you like to hire me? More or less. He had a better intro than that. I didn't even know what a sales coach was. But in 2 short phone calls, he convinces me, or I convince myself with his help, to give him a bunch of money to talk to him once a week on the phone for 30 minutes. It might sound like a crazy thing, but it was probably the smartest thing I did in the last 20 years of my life. And by talking to him, in fact, if you don't mind, I'll just read a little bit from my own intro about how that went. My own initial foray into sales after a long career in the U.S. Navy had more than a share of emotional ups and downs. A little background. I followed my father's footsteps to become a submarine captain. I worked on 5 different submarines, served as a commanding officer on the 5th. I led security operations in the Mediterranean and Atlantic and supported classified missions that involved Navy SEALs teams. I was in charge. I was comfortable. When I said jump, people said, how high? I was a valiant and brave sailor on the high seas. I faced death on a regular basis. But when I transitioned into civilian life and started making sales calls, I didn't feel great. I was terrified to pick up the phone and make a cold call. I realized I had entered a whole new world. Prospects thought nothing of misleading, obfuscating, or out-and-out lying to me about their intentions. They ignored my requests and suggestions. Sales interactions felt like fights more than mutually beneficial engagements for both parties. My big learning point came with the discovery of Sandler training and the help of my beloved sales mentor, Coach Jim. He helped me figure out that sales was as much a mind game as anything. He told me prospects would play with my mind as much as I let them. So you might have heard of the Chinese general and military strategist Sun Tzu. I'm a big reader. I do believe that leaders are readers. And Sun Tzu said in his book, The Art of War, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the results of 100 battles. And I do not see my prospects as enemies, but by parallel became, if I know my prospects and I know myself, I need not fear the results of 100 sales calls. So that's when I eventually started my sales training business. After a year of working with Coach Jim, it was so helpful that I said I wanted to do that. And my efforts at learning led me to sit down every Sunday afternoon for years to write articles. And basically, I had several hundred articles published in newspapers and journals. And this book is a collection of about 40 of those articles that are on the same theme, which is psychology. By the way, I'm not a psychologist, but if I was starting in sales today, I'd run to the nearest bookstore and get every book I could on psychology and concern myself with sales tactics later.
So smart on that. And I agree with you 110%. If you can, you got to understand the way humans think first before you can try to help them convince themselves to make purchases. I love this stuff, man. This is great. If folks out there want to get in touch with you and get access to your book, where should they go about connecting with you and to get access to the book?
Well, thank you. They can email me at McDonald@Sandler.com, McDonald, just like Ronald, McDonald@Sandler.com. That's SANDLER. And I can definitely send them signed copies. I can also direct them to Sandler Shop, where they can order them online. And of course, it's available on Amazon, but you can go to shop.sandler.com and find it there. Or like I said, email me at McDonald@Sandler.com.
Love that, man. Well, we thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show today. Super appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Donald, for having me.
Anytime. Man, I'm telling you, Brad came, he saw, he delivered. And if you haven't done so already, go check out Sandler Sales Training. Specifically, go connect with Brad. You can find all the information in the show notes, thesalesevangelist.com/the-word episode number 1174. Again, thesalesevangelist.com/the-word episode number 1174. While you're there, I ask that you guys go ahead and check out Sales Success Summit and start learning from one of the top 1%ers in sales. The conference is in Texas this year. And I'm telling you, man, the dude that went last year and was able to connect with so many influential individuals now is closing 6-figure deals. This could be your situation as well. Go back, get into the show notes, check out Sales Success Summit, and go ahead and attend. Also, check out TSE Certified Sales Training Program. Would love for you and your team members to come and join us. Find all the details in the show notes, thesalesevangelist.com/the-word episode number 1174. We share this because we want to help you. We want you to find more ideal customers. We want you to have more meaningful conversation. We want you to close more deals. But most importantly, is to challenge you to go out each and every single day and do big things. Hey, I hope you enjoyed the episode today as much as I did. And if so, I ask that you leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or wherever you find fine podcasts. Also, if you haven't done so already, why don't you go ahead and hit subscribe? Show your friends, your colleagues how they can subscribe as well. I will greatly appreciate you doing that. Thank you. My birthday is in the month of August. That could be your birthday gift to me. A nice review and rating on Apple Podcasts. I would truly, truly, truly be grateful for that. Our show today was produced by myself and the Sales Podcast Network. It was edited and mixed together by the one and only Jershino Bale. Our graphic designer is Mr. Desin Cunado. Our show note was created by the one and only Miss Rael. Our guest coordinator is Mrs. May Marr. Our podcast production manager is Mrs. Shannon Rasmussen. You can find audio credits to this and all of our episodes in the show notes. And as always, I am your host, your coach, your mentor, your guide down the sales journey, Mr. Donald C. Kelly, the Sales Evangelist. Sales Podcast Network.